All right, now, well, that was the most inopportune time to start a video. Hey, you guys, I hope you're doing great today. We're going to be talking about what psychology again today, but what psychologists actually do. The questions to consider, what we're going to reflect on throughout, major fields in psychology, and how people in these major fields of psychology serve people's needs. Okay. Major fields of psychology believe that theories and mental processes must be backed by scientific evidence. Within the major fields of psychology, you have three main groups. You've got psychologists that conduct research, psychologists that provide consultations to patients, and psychologists that teach. Some psychologists do a combination of these three. They either research and teach, they research and consult with patients, or they consult with patients and they teach other people how to do that as well. Clinical psychology is the largest field of psychology. It's broken down into child mental health, adult mental health, and geriatrics, or helping the elderly, learning disability, and general health. Their job is to help people with psychological problems overcome their problems and adjust to the world around them. The goal for psychologists is to change harmful or ineffective behavior in their patients. They can help them with things like relationship development, relationship problems they may have, drug abuse, controlling their weight. They evaluate patients through interviews and psychological tests, and they work in hospitals, prisons, universities, clinics, and in their own private practices. A psychologist and a psychiatrist are two different things. So, what's the difference? A psychologist is a person who specializes in the study of the mind and behavior and the treatment of mental, emotional, and behavioral disorders. Whereas a psychiatrist is a medical doctor who specializes in the treatment of psychological problems and can prescribe medicine. So the major difference, psychologists cannot prescribe medicine where a psychiatrist can. A psychologist treats through techniques, then cannot prescribe medicine. Okay, so psychologist, technique, psychiatrist, maybe some medicine. Okay. Next, we have counseling psychology. They use interviews and tests to determine problems. They treat people with adjustment issues. They do not treat major psychological disorders like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. All right, their goal of this profession is to help their client clarify their goals, help their patients overcome adjustment problems. So, counseling psychology would be great for a child whose parents have just divorced and they're having some issues adjusting to this new life where they have to live without mom or dad for a while. And they help their client meet and face challenges. Okay, or a young teenager just moved up into high school. Okay, well, they've got a lot of anxiety because of that. Counseling psychology would help with that. Psychologists for counseling psychology are employed at businesses, universities, and oftentimes testing centers. Next, we have school psychology. Gotta love that bell. School psychologists identify and help students who have problems that interfere with learning. They address problems such as learning disorders and peer and family problems. They determine if the problem exists by interviewing the teacher, the parent, and the student, administering intelligence and achievement tests, and by observing students in the classroom. That's called a field observation, observing someone in their natural habitat. Then they make recommendations to parents and teachers and students to help the student achieve their goals, reach their potential, and overcome their learning difficulties. They can also place the students in special classes and programs like gifted or support in order to help that student be successful. Educational psychologists or educational psychology, they have a broader role within a school system. Their ultimate goal, is to help students learn. They work on course planning and instructional methods for an entire school system. They're concerned with the theoretical issues that relate to the measurement of abilities, learning, and child and adolescent development. They often ask how learning is affected by psychological factors such as motivation, intelligence, emotion, and creativity, cultural factors, religion and language, socioeconomic status or the social class of that child and their family, and the instructional methods issued throughout the school system. Which ones are effective? Which ones are ineffective? They oftentimes also help create standardized tests that gauge how successful someone will be in college, such as the SAT and ACT for undergraduate and the GRE for graduate courses. Okay. Personality psychologists, they seek to identify human characteristics or traits. They study traits in their development and they determine the origin of psychological problems and disorders. They are also concerned with gender roles, aggression, and anxiety. Remember, gender roles are the expectations of men and women within a culture. Social psychology. This is the field of psychology that focuses on people's behavior in social situations. The main focus is on the external influences to a person to explain why people behave the way they do. They study how men and women act in certain settings. They study the physical and psychological factors that attract people to one another. They study why people conform to group standards and expectations, even when they may not align with their own values and beliefs. They study how people's behavior change once they become a part of a group. The reason for the effects of prejudice and discrimination within various groups from one group to another. And they study situations where people help others and where they are hostile to others. So, what would make somebody be hostile? What would make them be helpful? How are those situations handled differently by different people of certain groups? Experimental psychology is research into the basic processes such as functions of the nervous system and sensations and perception, memory and thinking and motivation. They explore biological and psychological reasons for human behavior. They are more likely to engage in basic research. And what basic research is it has no immediate application. It's done for its own sake. There's nothing, it's not pressing. Okay. The findings from this field are put into practice by other psychological fields and specialties. Sports psychologists, like when we talked about yesterday, A-Rod, is the study of how psychology influences sports, athletic performance, exercise, and physical activity. Sports psychologists work with coaches and professional athletes to improve performance and increase motivation. They work with athletes to handle intense pressure that comes with competition. They help them overcome their problems with focus and motivation, as well as improve their performance and overcome injuries. Some work with individuals to utilize exercise and sports to improve their lives and well being throughout their lifespan. Two other fields of psychology include industrial and organizational psychology and human factors psychology. Industrial and organizational psychology, these guys are employed by corporations to improve working conditions and improve worker output. So you would have this at like Goodyear. Okay. You also have human factor psychology. Any of your major corporations like Samsung, Apple, these psychologists work to find the best ways to design products for people to use. And the ultimate goal is for people to buy them. What is going to make this product appealing? How are people going to respond to certain things that we add or take away from this product? Community psychology are social systems that promote and foster individual well-being. Example, mental health centers, hospital programs, school-based program, Boys and Girls Club will be an example, Alcoholics Anonymous. These institutions seek to promote change in the social environment, and they help children and elderly develop coping strategies. The goal is to prevent threats to mental health and the social environment. Then you have health psychology. These psychologists seek to determine how behavior and mental processes are related to your physical health. They look at the effects of stress on your health. They focus on prevention and reducing the risk of diseases, and they help people adopt a balanced diet and exercise. All right, rehabilitation psychology helps people struggling with the effects of a disability. A disability is any condition that limits the physical, sensory, cognitive, or emotional functioning of an individual. Really, rehabilitation psychologists would be like for someone who was just in a major accident, they lost a limb, or uh, come back from war and they're hurt really bad, and maybe they're paralyzed, or maybe they've had a stroke and they don't have use of one side of their body, right? Cross-cultural psychology or psychologists study the behavior and mental processes under different cultural conditions. Okay? Developmental psychology study the changes throughout a person's lifespan. Changes that they look at are the social, emotional, physical, and cognitive or mind changes that occur throughout a person's life. These psychologists explore the influence of heredity and environment on a person's development. This is this concept of nature versus nurture. Forensic psychology. All right, these work with the criminal justice system. They work to determine if a person is competent to stand trial. They assist in the selection of police officers. They help police officers cope with job stress, and they train officers to handle suicide, threats, hostage crisis, family violence. This field has been made very popular by television shows like Criminal Minds, Bones, Law and Order, Numbers. However, on many of those shows, you see a profiler. The forensic psychologist makes a profile based on the evidence. A lot of times, those profiles are inaccurate because you're basing who is innocent or guilty off of evidence where you don't really know who it is. You can't tell by someone's shoe size, what color they are. You can't tell by the rope that they used where they shop. Lowe's and Home Depot both have the same thing. So what we have found that many of those things that profilers come up with are inaccurate, but shows like Criminal Minds and Bones have glorified it a lot and made them seem like they're accurate 100% of the time, when that's clearly not the case. So, what are some of the major fields in psychology? That is a loaded question, right? You've got sports psychologists, health psychologists, educational psychologists, and the list goes on and on. They, the How do people in some fields of psychology serve people's needs? They help people adjust. They help people cope. They help people come up with techniques to make their lives better, to reach their goals and achieve their dreams. All right. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's lesson. I'll see you next time. Thanks.